Well, you mentioned earlier about film. You mentioned A Serious Man. And what was that like working with the Coen Brothers?
It was amazing. Their set, like Clint Eastwood set, is very quiet. And it's because everybody knows exactly what they're doing.
This is Coop's Comedy Corner. Coop's Comedy Corner.
Welcome to Coop's Comedy Corner. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and I want to give a big shout out to my producer, Jimmy Corhan from Comedy Train Rek. They do so much. They do so much for the Philadelphia area comedians and people who are creators. So go check them out and go follow Coop's Comedy Corner on YouTube and Spotify. And we have a great show today. You know, I interviewed this gentleman 10 years ago when I lived in Burbank for my show, Cooper Talk. But what was the weirdest part was I remember seeing him on commercials, which he's on so many commercials. But before that, I remember I saw him like over 25 years ago when I lived in San Diego in Triple Espresso, a play. And I remembered him because I went and it was such a fun time. And I remembered his face. And all of a sudden I'm watching TV. I'm going, is that him on Triple Espresso? And I saw him on Fargo, the TV show. So I reached out to him and he came in studio in Burbank and he was in Triple Espresso. And my guest is Peter Breitmayer. How you doing, Pete?
I'm good. How are you? How you doing, man?
You know, it's amazing. You made such an impression on that show, Triple Espresso. Tell people about Triple Espresso real quick, because it was such a fun show.
Well, Triple Espresso is the show that will never die. It started in like 1998, and I came in, got asked to come in and replace Dane Stauffer, who was a Minneapolis guy. Went in, and I'd never seen the show. I went to go see it, and I thought, this is like the most sophomoric show I've ever seen. And the audience was howling so hard that there was a guy practically throwing up in the aisle, you know, and I didn't get it at first. And then I did this thing, and it's three failed comedians. The premise is three failed comedians. They get together for the reunion of the one guy who's a coffee shop entertainer, and two of them can't stand each other. And the other one's the guy that's trying to mediate between the two of them, and they relive their failed past. And it ran in San Diego for years. I did it in Dublin, Ireland. I did it in Portland, Oregon. I did it in Portland, Maine. I did it in Minneapolis. I did it in San Diego. I did it all over the place. And they would have multiple guys playing the roles so they could mix and match the cast. They had the original creators, and then you'd go to Triple Espresso school and you'd learn this show and learn all the bits. And it was just a weird success. They even translated it into Danish at one point. Some Danish company theater company wanted to do it, and they did it over in Denver. I'm not sure how well it went, but when we did in Ireland, we had to make quite a few adjustments, but it ended up being a big hit there. I don't know. That was like way back in the day. I haven't done that show I think the last time I did it was 2006 or something like that. A lot of fun. The show took off in San Diego because the morning jocks came to see it on one of the radio shows, and they would not stop talking about the show. They talked about the show for 3 weeks on their radio show in the morning, and it just sold the theater out for months. You know, it was quite an amazing phenom. So,
and it was at a theater downtown, right? Because I lived in the Gas Lamp at the time, and I think I walked over.
It was the Gas Lamp Theater. Yeah, it was right downtown on that Central Avenue at the very south end of it, basically. Yeah. And I was living up here. They housed us down there, so I'd go down on Wednesday, come up, go to auditions. I do work here in town, and I buzz down on Wednesday, take 4 hours if I can get there because of the traffic. Do the shows during the week. Sunday night, get in my car, take 2 hours to get back to North Hollywood to my house in the middle of the night. And, I did that for, I don't know, I'm going to say 8 months or something like that. It was kind of nuts, but people loved it.
I want to talk about it was a great show. And I want to talk about how you got into acting, but let's talk about, I swear to God, every time I turn the TV on in the last year, you're on there. And it's funny because my wife gets tired of me hearing whenever I see past Cooper Talk guests, whether it's on an episodic or on a commercial, I'm like, hey, honey, such and such. Now, tell me, tell me some of the commercials you're on right now. Because in the last year, just go over a few of them because there's been a shitload.
Well, I did this commercial for an internet provider, and I'm forgetting, it ran for a while there, and I'm trying to even remember who it was. It was not it was an internet provider, and it was the premise was it's a town where they're getting they're wired up, and I played this weird mayor, and that was one that ran for quite a while. And I did one that aired on the Super Bowl, and then the version they aired in the Super Bowl I wasn't in, and then I did a spot for Instacart, and they had like all the most classic mascots for all the different products. They had the Old Spice guy, and they had the Energizer Bunny, and they had all these things, and they were invading this neighborhood, and me and this other woman were the couple in the house looking at this incredible crazy invasion. That was a fun spot. I've done a couple of those, but as far as commercially, I've done maybe 3 or 4 spots in the last couple of years, but mostly what I've been doing is like I shot like a Western last week. I've never done a Western before, which is weird. And I tend to get cast. I do drama as well as comedy. So I end up getting cast in, episodics that are dramatic and in comedy stuff. But I did this Western, and that was like out in the middle of nowhere in Yucca Valley at this place called the White Horse Ranch, just this piece of crap complex that they've shot hundreds of Westerns at. And they even have their own wardrobe building. So when you rent this place, you get access to like 3,000 items of wardrobe for a Western town, and it was hard to get out there. You're driving on dirt roads. You're like, where am I going? What is this? Like there's nothing there except for this fake Western town, and I had a guy playing my heavy, and I was asking him, I said, you look like you could really do a lot of these. Are you, is it you work out here often? And he goes, yeah, I live in Apple Valley over here, and I've done like 40 movies out here. And I said, oh, that's incredible. He goes, yeah, I've died everywhere. I've died over there. I've died over there. I fell off of that. I got hung right there. I fell off that building. So that was kind of a trip.
So how did that come about? Because I always think, if people aren't familiar, there's something called breakdowns when you audition, and some people get offers, but the breakdowns I always crack up with the breakdowns because they can be the most what should I say? They can pigeonhole you. I mean, if anyone did it in a real job, they could get in trouble. Because I auditioned, I got a part for a creepy guy. Well, if I went in a Calvin Harris video, if I went into a job and they said, we're looking for a creepy guy, everyone would be all over him. So for you, what was the breakdown for the Western? And because you've never done one before, were you excited? Like, oh, this might be something great.
Well, I don't get a lot of these, but it was an offer. But the breakdown was basically a really evil banker character who basically is trying to get with the wife of a guy who he's going to foreclose business on. And so I sometimes get these bad guys, like Serious Man. I played like the racist neighbor, who had a hierarchy of racism. He liked his Jewish neighbor more than he liked the Korean guy that came to harass his Jewish neighbor. So so it's really fun to play the bad guys basically. But this breakdown was, a very bad man who is after the wrong things, who controls this whole town, and every actor knows that it's more fun to play somebody who's evil and nasty than it is to play, the lead guy to play, and so it's a lot of fun. I like when I get that kind of stuff. I'm going to be doing another kind of a horror thriller, and it's going to shoot in Colombia in March, the country of Colombia. And it's a border town story that takes place in Texas, and it has an immigration theme. It has kind of it's a spooky thing about it's kind of got a ghost theme as well, and it's going to be a lot of fun. But everybody whenever I say I'm going to go to Colombia and shoot this movie, everybody's always like, well, is it safe? Are you going to be safe down there? It's like, well, I know the guy that's shooting, he's shot like 3 movies down there, and like obviously there's going to be places you shouldn't go, and there's going to be places that are going to be okay, so I'm not really worried about it. But
now, do you get excited for like going away like that, or are you someone who'd rather be a homebody? Because LA's changed so much. Like, look, I lived outside Philadelphia, and Task was just a big hit on HBO. So now they're doing the second season. They're bringing all this work in, and people were excited. For you, do you get excited about going to another country to shoot, or are you like, hey, I'd rather shoot at the Valencia Ranch for NCIS? I mean,
I
what do you like?
absolutely love to go on location like that to shoot. I love taking a trip somewhere on somebody else's dime and working and create, being in front of the camera, creating, and then having time off to explore places. I mean, because I've worked in a few different places, and I worked in Ireland. I've worked in Vancouver. I've worked in Atlanta. I think I've worked in Minneapolis. I've shot in Minneapolis too, obviously, but I love it when the opportunity comes to go to a far off distant place and, be an actor for a while and get, live in a hotel room for a few weeks. For me, I enjoy that. It takes me kind of out of my pressure element of being at home, and I'm just focused on this one thing, and then I can explore. So, because my wife and I have always loved traveling, and I think I always will. I like doing road trips too. I have a 77 VW camper that is this kind of tricked out with the pop top, and we try to take that out as much as we can because California has a lot to offer too. But yeah, I do look.
What got you into acting?
What
got you into acting? I know you were you really got your chops in Minneapolis or Minnesota. What kind of kid were you? Like, what were you interested in acting as a kid? Did you watch TV and say I want to do that, or did you progress into it? Like,
yeah, it didn't start till I played what was it? I was in Little Mary Sunshine when I was 12 years old in middle school. That was the first thing I ever did on stage, and I think it really hooked me. The attention I was getting, the laughs, the applause, and so it kind of started in high school, and that's where it all started. And then I went on to college. In college, I went to college with Pete Krause and Steve Zahn at this small Lutheran college in Minnesota called Gustavus Adolphus College, and Pete Krause played my son in 3 different plays there. We're still kind of we contact each other every once in a while. And Steve, went on to do his huge things, but I just, I kind of just started on the stage, and I went to Minneapolis and I worked at Dudley Riggs doing, sketch comedy and improv and political social satire, the highbrow stuff. And then, moved out here, and it just kind of kept rolling. I kept getting little pieces of this, little pieces of that. And I did the progressive thing for 10 years with Brad McDonald's, the Another Insurance guys. That was a really fun gig, and paid for a lot of things in my life, which was great, and just doing, guest stars and doing recurrings. I did that, you did that episode with the guy that worked on Raymond. I did that show, The Middle, with Patty Heaton. I played her nemesis at the used car lot that she was at in The Middle, and that was fun, So it's just kind of been like a sort of a regular gradual progression. I know people who come out here, like my friend Missy Peterman. She came out here, and in 3 months she was on the Reba show as a regular, and she's just gigantic. She does everything. And my friend Wayne Wilderson, his career has kind of gone at this slow increase, and I feel like everybody's on this different, not to, it sounds very trite to say, but everybody's on a different journey, man. So it's like, some people are on the slope, and some people hit these plateaus and they go up a little bit and then they hit another plateau, and some people just rock it, and they kind of just stay up here. I feel like my career has just kind of gradually escalated over time. And I think a lot of the best, I really do believe a lot of the best work that I'm going to be doing is going to be ahead of me, and it's funny because I haven't done stand-up for decades, and that's something I've started to think about doing again, which probably isn't wise since I'm 60 years old. Who's going to listen to me? But
actually, I'm going to interrupt there because I did stand up from 88 to 95. It was my job, and I would do it in LA occasionally. When I moved back here to Philly, I started doing it again, and I found out that I had my own voice. I just did a 50-minute set to headline this benefit, and it's scary. But luckily, it's like, for some reason, when you're over a certain age, you end up gravitating towards crowds that are your age, and they can really relate to you because, as you said, you haven't done it for years. Well, what you did back then would be completely different what we do now. I mean, have you actually tried to formulate an act or anything, or what's your? Because I want to hear you about just trying to do stand up.
Well, I mean, I haven't, it's funny because like when I came out here, I'd done so much improv. And when I came out here, I mostly I did some improv at like Second City and stuff like that, but I never went the Groundlings route. And I never went the other route with the other main companies around here. And I occasionally did stuff. People would ask me to do it, and I had fun doing it. But for some reason, I stopped doing the improv stuff and the sketch comedy stuff. I used it a lot in my work. Like when I would audition, I would improvise all the time. And when I would work, I would improvise if I was allowed to all the time, And when I do plays out here, I juice them up as well. But as far as the stand-up, it was just like little things here and there. For a while there, I had like 5 minutes, and then I kind of put it all away because I was doing other things. So I'm at this stage now where I'm sort of like taking notes. I've got my pad. I'm writing stuff down that I think is interesting, that I think could be constructed and put together, and I'm eventually I'm just looking for, it's funny to be 60 and to have one career and then kind of go, I'd like to maybe do a couple open mics just to kind of try some stuff out, and fail, and like go in and fuck up and like just screw up and go, okay, that was interesting. Like, why did that not work? And have that kind of courage. Cause like you said, we're older guys. And as you get older, I feel like I'm really getting to a stage in my life where I just like, I love doing the work, but I don't have as much of a fire in the belly for the business itself, that they pursuing the administration of a career. I like to wait for the phone to ring, which, is probably a good and bad thing, but it seems to be working out for me. So, but I feel like I need a new challenge, and that's one of the challenges that I want to kind of pursue. So, and I know that it's exciting to be talking to you because I know you were in that world and you still continue to talk to a lot of people in that world. And, I think it's an interesting world. I mean, it's, but we've all heard the stories about people being on the road and all that kind of stuff, but I just think it's kind of an interesting art form, and if you're good at it.
It is, and it's all different levels. Now, you mentioned Melissa and Wayne Wilderson. Do you knew them from Minnesota?
Yeah, I knew Melissa from Dudley Riggs' Brave New Workshop, and her husband John Brady is a really hilarious actor. They met there. Wayne I know from Minneapolis, doing comedy and theater with him, and I hang out with him a lot here, along with a lot of other Minnesotans who are performers out here. Rich Hutchman, other people that work all the time, who are doing pretty well, So, and it's a lot of, there's kind of a Midwest mafia here. And I think that the industry kind of likes us because we're not insane when we show up on a set, and we know how to sign a contract, and we come on time, and we know how to take notes and that kind of thing.
It's funny that you say that about the Midwest, because I know, like, Pat Finn and Pete Holm and all those guys are the same thing.
I know those guys.
They're just like this. They're like this link, like they know each other, and they just look out for each other. I mean, who was on the middle? Neil Flynn. No, Neil Flynn. Yeah, he became huge, but he's still Neil Flynn. Right? He became huge, and they're all like this little circle. And even like I'm friends with Rose Abdu, who married a friend of mine, and she's friends with Nia Vardalos and Susie Yakamura and Kate Flannery. And it's weird, they all met in the Midwest, and they've all kept this cohesive bond. And like you said, like Melissa Peterman has risen, and now she's back on the new Reba show. But everyone seems to just really keep in touch, because I think everyone goes back to those roots. That's like Philadelphia comics. We go back to these roots where it was like, it sucked in the beginning. It was fun, but it was like, you weren't making money. You weren't, if you got a $50 gig, you were happy. And then you see people start getting a break, and you're very excited for them. Where I think in like LA, people who live in LA or don't really know people, they're jaded. They're jaded by the time they're like, after their first year of waiting tables, they're pissed off. I mean, it's just weird with you Midwesterners.
It's a marathon, not a sprint for most of us. You know what I mean? So it's like, if you think of it as a sprint and you burn yourself out, you're going to get really, really jaded. You're trying to make it happen so fast, and I'm going to force this down their throats, and then eventually you just kind of get tired and people quit, you know, but it's the people that treat it like a marathon, I think, that make it. And a lot of these Midwesterns I know have been living out here for a long time and working, you know, Pat was on The Middle as well as a recurring, you know, just like me, just a different part of the world of it, you know. And he's a great guy, you know. Hinneman is great. And you know, they have Beer Shark Mice. Those guys do Beer Shark Mice, which is a improv show and sketch comedy out here, you know, with Neil Flynn and Pat and a few other guys, Keckner, Dave Keckner and stuff like that. And you know, the Chicago guys are, you know, great. They're really close. I play in a ping pong tournament once a month called we call it PPV, Ping Pong Valhalla. And it's, you know, we show up, we buy in, there's a bracketing, people go away with money and a set of Viking horns, and there's food and drink, and it's great. And a lot of these guys are Midwestern guys. You know, Jerry Collins, who's writing for Will Ferrell's show, the golf show, you know, he kind of runs the thing. And, you know, Matt Winston and you know, Jim Turner. I mean, Jim Turner's like hilarious
from Iowa. Jim Turner from Iowa.
Yeah. Jim Turner. He plays, you know, it's like JP Manu. There's all kinds of great, you know, Pete Gardner, who was on my Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, you know, he's in this group too. And we have the same agent, you know, he's great. And it's just like, it's, you know, I feel like out here, because of the nature of what LA is, you gravitate toward good, solid human beings, and you want to spend time with those people because there's so many other crazy things going on, you know. And there's a lot of, you know, there's unreliable people, and there's people that aren't so great. There's, you know, and that's most of my experiences out here have been really, really positive, you know. But you still have that core group of friends, and my core group of friends are all comic actors, you know, and they've just stuck it out, you know, and they've made a life for themselves out here, you know, as I have, you know, you know, getting insurance and buying a house and, you know, doing sort of like the artist middle class thing, the working man's thing, you know, but still being on screen on a regular basis. So I've been real grateful for it. I'll tell you that. Yeah.
Now, what was it like when you first moved out? How long till you started getting work? And did it take you a while to get an agent? Because, you know, I got an agent very quick, but I have a wookie eye, and I'm just different character type. But for you, I mean, did it take you a while to get an agent, or what was your process? Do you remember the first job you got?
I got a commercial agent pretty quickly because we came out here to do this play called The Bad Seed. We did a send-up version of The Bad Seed, of that movie about the little girl in the 50s. You know, it was a movie from the 50s, a little girl who's a murderer, but everybody thinks she's sweet, and she has a pink polka dot dress and the whole thing. And it was written by this guy, Maxwell Anderson. It looks like it always felt like he wrote one draft drunk and just handed it in, because it was just so verbose and just written over the top. But it was this ridiculous play. And my friend Danny Schmitz, who again is a comic genius, was like, we're doing this play, but we're going to do it as a send-up version, and it's going to be hilarious. And we came out and we did it. He booked this theater in West Hollywood. We came out in a caravan, and we did this show. It was a hit. Half of us stayed. Half of the people went back to Minneapolis. But we had a couple guys here who already were connected to the group who had really good agents. So I got with Kazarian Measures, well, it ended up being Kazarian Measures and Ruskin, which is the agency that blew up a few years ago. And then I was with Cunningham for like 5 years, and that went well. But getting a theatrical agent and getting that going really did take some time. It took like a couple of years to finally get, you know, some traction and start booking some things and start even being able to get in some rooms, you know, because back then it was all like in-person appointments. So there was a lot fewer slots, you know, than there is now with the self-tape stuff. I mean, you know, but all the self-tape stuff I get now is still from my agent. I don't do my own, you know, I have them. I'm with, you know, a great agency, Ellis Talent Group. And I've been with them since like 2001, but it took a while to get things going. I'm telling you, you know, luckily I had some commercial.
Why is that?
Well,
why do you think it took a while? Because you had commercial and you had stage.
Because it's much harder to get it's always been much harder to get a theatrical agent than it has been to get a commercial agent, because the commercial agents are just looking for new, fresh faces that can be for television, and it doesn't take as much skill, to do it. I mean, there's lots of skilled actors out there who also do commercials. I think I'm one of them. But the commercial people are always looking for new people. I had a big reel from Minneapolis of all these commercials I had done, so that really, really helped me. But I only had a couple and I'd done a made-for-TV movie called The Stranger Within with Chris Sarandon and Kate. Kate, the original, one of the original Charlie's Angels, Kate Jackson, and that I had that on a reel, and I had a Arnold Schwarzenegger Christmas movie on a reel, and like 2 other things, not much. I didn't have much to show, you know what I mean? And so, and I think there's a lot of, like, at the time I was a young blonde guy in my mid 30s, and there was a lot of those guys out here, but eventually people kind of started to gravitate toward me, and I started getting, once I got into a cash register's office, they didn't forget me, and they would bring me back again. And, it's always frustrating when you go in and you've been here for a few years, and you meet somebody for the first time who's casting something, and you read for them, and they look at you slack jawed, and they go, "Where have you been?" And it's like, well, my picture's probably been on your desk 50 times already. You just haven't picked it up and called me in. So this is the first time you've actually seen me read, but I've been in front of your face many, many times, So, and when you finally kind of break that shell, it helps. And then you start to have some relationships. But boy, that's why so many people quit. They come here from Ohio, and it's like, I'm going to give myself 6 months to become a movie star. And 6 months comes up, and they're still waiting tables, and they live in a shitty apartment with the bad roommate, and they just pack their car up and go. So,
you'd mentioned earlier about self-tape, and I always like to hear different actors' opinions on this. And it seems people who've been in the game for a long time, like you, and who have an improv background or stage background, really loved going in the room. And then the self-tape, some of them like them, but they always hear the story of, in the room, you got to go in, you got to kick ass, you got to do it. And if they like it, you can do it another time. In this self-tape, I think sometimes, because I always say actors, comics, whatever, we're 50% narcissistic and 50% insecure. So you sit there and you do it on a tape, and a lot of actors, they keep trying to get that right hit. So I've had 70% more actors I talk to who've been around for a while really like the room better. What's your take on it? Because you've been involved with both, and you said now your agent gets you the tape, but what's your take on it?
Well, I think that's a really good question, and I think that it sounds like you're hearing kind of from both schools. I'm sort of in the middle about it. I mean, I love the self-tape because there's a control to rehearsing and working on it, and being able to choose the takes, and working in between the takes in a different way than you could actually work in the room in between takes. You can take your time. The room makes you more nervous. It's okay to have some nerves when you go in, but the room makes you a little more nervous. So sometimes it's hard to be as relaxed unless you're just, the more nervous you are, usually it's an indication of preparation. And, so the more nervous you are, the less prepared you are generally. That's really how it goes. So I like meeting the cast actors, and I like going to the room, but I've really enjoyed doing self-tapes. It hasn't bothered me. The one thing that's bad about it is you don't get any feedback. So you can't do a take and then have them go, I love what you're doing, but you're missing this key element to this guy. He's like this. And it's like, oh, interesting. I didn't think about that. And then you insert that, and you do 2 things when you do that. You can prove that you can take a note, and you can shift from the thing that you are married to in your head about how this goes. And you actually are listening, to what they're saying. But in the self-tape situation, every once in a while I'll send something in, and my manager will call me and say, hey, they want you to redo it because it looks like you didn't quite understand what this was supposed to be or whatever, but that's very rare. But occasionally that'll happen. At this point, I think I know what I know, and I know that the choices I'm making are strong. And if they don't pick me, it's not because I suck. It's just because I'm just not right for the part. And there's somebody else out there that did a great job too, who's more right for the part, But I do miss going in and seeing people's faces. It's very weird, like to see. I've had this incident happen to me more than one time. I've been in public because we don't go into casting directors' offices anymore for theatrical. I mean, rarely, occasionally, but almost never. For commercial, we're back doing things in person about 80% of the time. But I've been out in public, and I've had somebody come up to me really warmly and talk to me and like, "Hey, Pete, how are you?" And I'm like, "Hey, hi, yeah, hi, wow, God, good to see you." Blah blah, chit chat. Who is this? Who is this? Who is this? And eventually, they reveal that they are a casting director that has been seen watching my tapes for a long, long time, and maybe put me in a couple of things, but I haven't seen their face for so long, for years, that I don't know what they look like anymore, barely. But they know what I look like because they see tape of me all the time. It's the same effect that like people on Facebook and in social media, God love them. And this is not a criticism, but this is just a natural thing that happens. People think they know you because they see you on the tube and they see you online, but you don't. And it's somebody from high school and you don't remember them at all. Not because you're an asshole, but just because you don't remember them. But they think because they've seen you, you've seen them, And so it's just a weird. So you kind of have to get through some of those things. But long story short, it'd be nice to go in a little bit more of the time. In the new contract, they do have a thing. They have a provision where they generally, for certain projects, they have to offer a certain number of slots. And when those slots fill up, they can stop filling them and everybody else has to self-tape. So if you get something from your agent or your manager and they say, "Hey, this is due at 5:30 on Wednesday. If you want to do an in-person Zoom audition, tell me now so I can call them and tell them to get you a spot for Tuesday or whatever." Half the time I say yeah, and the other half of the time I look at the material and I go, "I think I'm just going to do this one self-tape and send it in," or I might have a scheduling thing. So, it's a whole new world out there.
Well, you mentioned something earlier that piqued my interest. You said now you're just not the right guy for the part. And I've heard people say that. Patrick Fabian, has been on my show, Coop Dog, a bunch of times and said the whole story before Better Call Saul, how he didn't get Dog with a blog. And he said the reason was he wasn't the right person for the part. But for that role in Better Call Saul, he was the right person. When did you start figuring that out? Because anything like, when you're young, an actor, you think you nailed an audition and you're like, fuck these people. I should have got the role. That guy. And you watch them on TV. When did you come to that realization that it's not you, it's the part, which I think for an actor, that's a very big step. And I think it comes with age and wisdom.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good question, a very good discussion topic too, because, it has to do with your personality too. Like, we're all human. And so we all get disappointed when we don't get something that we wanted to get. And I still go through little things sometimes where I feel like I should have fucking gotten that, and I didn't get it, blah, blah. But most of the time, honestly, Coop, I know that I'm going to say for the last 25 years, I've known that my job is to deliver the best audition I can deliver, do the work, do the homework, create the character, make great choices, make strong choices, tape it, deliver it, and then go have lunch. Because that's the only thing you have control of is how well you do in the room or how good the submission is. And you don't know any of the politics behind it. You don't know if you look like, one of the producer's ex-boyfriends and they can't stand to watch you on screen. You don't know, you don't know what all the little ins and outs are. You don't know if somebody's friend is being considered from the writer's room first, even though they may not be perfect, better for the part than you. So I've kind of learned to sort of let that go if I know I've submitted a good audition. If I feel like I haven't done up to snuff and I turn it in, sometimes I get disappointed and go, Pete, what the hell are you doing? You got, you didn't give your best shot. And so you don't know if you could have gotten this based on that. But most of the time I feel like I do. And I just let it go, because I'm not a worrier for one thing. I've never been like a big person who worries, like, where's the next job going to be? And what am I going to do? And how am I going to pay for this? And blah, blah. I just keep doing what I'm doing. And I try to keep the skill set up. And I let go of things I'm not in control of. And young actors have such a hard time with it, just like you said. I mean, you know, you saying like you audition, you think you killed it. And you're like, why didn't I get that? I killed that. They were laughing their asses off in the room. And they were just like, everybody loved me. And I didn't get it. Well, it's because there's 30 people went into the room, 30 separate actors, and 3 or 4 people or 8 people killed it, just like you. And somebody else was more right for it. So, and there's only one part. There's only one part, you know? So it's like they might have, but the thing that's beautiful is that when you go in and you do that well, or you submit a tape that's that good, they're not going to forget you. They're absolutely not. It's always productive. And because they're always going to say, let's make sure we put this guy in the we'll see you again pile instead of the we'll never see you again pile, you know? And that's kind of so much central to the game, you know, that you deliver the best thing you can deliver, and most of the time you're not going to get it, but you're always going to be in their mind for something else. So I get upset with the actors who get pissed off. It's like, you know, I do all these auditions and I do all this stuff and I just, you know, I'm barely booking, and why even go to the trouble? It's like, well, because you're creating a mystique in the minds of the casting directors and the producers. You're creating something in their minds for future use, you know, for another project when you're really going to be right for it. How many famous people have you talked to who almost gave up because they just weren't getting something? And like the story you just told, and then all of a sudden they got the right thing, the thing that was just right. You know?
You also mentioned, you said, you know, you go in and you do your job. The best you can do after is go and get lunch. But how do you deal with the rejection? Because I have another podcast where I deal with business people, and you know, I tell them, I go, you guys, you know, you're entrepreneurial. It's bullshit compared to the rejection that actors go through, because actors go through rejection. I mean, how many auditions? You know, I mean, you know, Chip Chinnery. Chip, I think, did like 150 auditions and got nothing, and then finally he got like 10 nationals in a year. Like, so it was constantly.
I love Chip.
Chip
Chinnery's awesome.
He's
such
great.
a great.
No. How do you deal though? I mean, I know you can say I'm all positive and this, but rejection hurts, man. It hurts.
Yeah, it does. No, I'm not going to pretend that I'm somebody I'm not. I'm not going to be the guy who's, you know, the toxic positivity guy. It absolutely is hard to get the rejection. And like, I go through slow periods, you know, to be honest with you, like last year and the year before, in comparison to what my life has been prior to that, they were slow. You know, and you start to question, like, geez, what is going on? How come I'm not booking? Blah, blah, you know, and I'm still in it. But does anybody even give a shit? You know? So it is really, it's hard to get the rejection, but like, you know, in the actor world, if you're booking 10% of what you're auditioning, then you're killing it. You know, people that say I booked 10%, you're like, what, really? You know, that's incredible. So that means 90% of the time people are saying, no, thank you. Next. And you just have to have that thick skin, or you have to have, you know, such an understanding that it's, you know, it's about you, of course, but it's not about you also, you know, as to why you didn't get it. And I've grown over the years, you know, to, you know, accept the ebbs and flows of how this industry goes, especially now, especially what's, you know, I'm amazed that there's so many shows out there on streaming services and on TV and all these places, and it's so dead in town half the time. And that's because they're shooting in other places, you know, all over the country and in Canada and blah, blah as well. But, you know, it feels like there's 460 scripted shows. We should all be a regular amount of busy. Why aren't we all a regular amount of busy, you know? But that's just, you know, that's what it's like right now. And you just keep doing, like right now, you know, I'm just going to start tonight. I'm going to a rehearsal for Bob's Holiday Office Party, which is this show that Joe Keys and Rob Elk wrote years and years ago. It's been going for 27 years, and it happens around Christmas. And I've done it maybe 8 or 9 times over the years. And it's this hilarious, ridiculous comedy about people in small town Iowa, the small town of Neuterberg, Iowa. And it takes place, it's a Christmas party in an insurance salesman's office. And it's funny as hell. And what you have to do is you have to have these other things in your life that are fulfilling, that aren't just, when am I going to get on TV and when am I going to get a movie, you know? I'm going to be I'm hopefully, I won't get cut. I'm going to be at the top of the Mandalorian Grogu movie, which is really exciting. I shot that like last year, and that was really, really fun, but things are still happening, but you are getting said no to a lot of the time. And, that's my friend Danielle Kennedy. She's 82 years old. She started acting for TV and film when she was in her late 60s, maybe early 70s. And she's doing great, but she lives out in Rancho Mirage with her husband, and she takes it as it comes, and I think there's a maturity level. I think you kind of said this earlier. There's a level of wisdom and maturity that comes as we age about this rejection stuff. And it's not this false positivity. It's just this sense of groundedness. I have my professional life and I love it. And I also have a real fulfilling real life, and I have relationships with people, and I read books, and I do other things in my life as well, and you have to have both of those things. Otherwise you'd go nuts.
Well, you mentioned earlier about film. You mentioned A Serious Man. And what was that like working with the Coen Brothers?
It was amazing. Their set, like Clint Eastwood set, is very quiet, and it's because everybody knows exactly what they're doing, and they are funny, quiet, funny, wry guys. And I worked on that for a couple weeks, and it was in Minnesota. It was shot in Bloomington, at least the scenes that I did, and then out in Stillwater, a few other things happened. I can't say enough about them. I think that they're true auteurs, although they would laugh at that, classification, because they talked about, they talk about how, pretty much what we do now is the same thing that we were doing when we were, 12 years old and going to the airport with a Super 8 camera and shooting a short that they called, Henry Kissinger, Man on the Move. It's like, it's basically the same. There's just more resources, And so, yeah, they were a delight. I have one good story about doing that, where it's very much a good actor lesson story about, is it really about you all the time? I was shooting this scene where I had to pull up in a car, and the kid they'd cast as my son was a doppelganger for me. And he was a really sweet kid, but he had Asperger's. So he was like 12, and he was more like he was sort of 7. So he kind of had to be managed. And I told the guys, I will take care of it. I'm his dad in the show. So I'll be, his dad thing. But we were pulling the car up, and there's this scene where we pull up into our driveway, and then the neighbor comes to talk to us. We get out of the car, and I'm staring at this neighbor, and we have this exchange, and we did this take like 16 times. And I started getting sort of nervous. Like, am I bad? What's happening here? And finally, I think Joel sensed that I was getting uncomfortable or feeling self-conscious. And he pulled me aside and he said, listen, he goes, Pete, listen, I've been doing this a long time, and never be in a scene with the little kid who gets out of a car and stares into the camera lens every single time he gets out of the car, because we're not watching you anymore. And never be in a scene where a tour bus has to drive by exactly at a specific time in the background, because we're not watching you anymore. He's like, I watched your first few takes. I said, he's fine. And he's on the walkie. Now, can we get the damn tour bus to drive by exactly when, what the hell's going on? Why is this kid, notice when you watch the movie, you can see that they soft focus the kid's face a little bit, because they had so many takes where he was staring right into the lens that they just couldn't use him. So they said, well, we want to use one of these takes. So they had to soft focus his eyes so that you couldn't see that he was like looking right at the camera. So that's an example of like you thinking it's all about you, like, oh, I suck, or I'm not getting it right, or nobody's communicating with me, or what am I doing wrong? It had nothing to do with that. It had to do with technical stuff, just trying to get through it. So I love that he pulled me aside to tell me that, because, that's good. That's a good director.
Who are some other people that you're, and you've been in this for a long time. Who are some of the other people you worked with that you're just amazed?
Oh, I was amazed
when you started out. You never thought.
I was amazed at Clint's set, because it was like.
And what movie are you with him in?
I did a movie called The Changeling, or just Changeling, and it was takes place in the 20s, and Malkovich was in it, and I'm trying to remember the actress, gorgeous actress, much bigger back in the early aughts, but it was a period piece. And it just, he's the kind of guy who, everybody knows everybody knows what they're doing already on set. So it's a quiet set. There's no yelling. There's no, anything weird happening. So, and he doesn't say action. So he gets the camera going and then he looks up at you, and I was sort of like waiting for him to say action, and I didn't see it. So I kind of looked over at him and he just did this. He just went, because he doesn't like actors jumping into the scene, and he feels if he says action, it's like, oh, okay. So he just he rolls the camera and he says, whenever you're ready, just start, and he gets maybe two, but usually just one take of each setup. Like I had a speech that I had to do. It's kind of long speech, and he set the camera up in maybe 3 places, and he only got one take of each these speeches, and then he did the dialogue stuff. But we had this gigantic light in this huge hall downtown that was supposed to look like 1922 LA, and this huge light was hanging up on the ceiling and lighting 400 extras and me up at the podium. It was a big city council meeting, and all of a sudden this light, it's full of helium, and it's got the lights inside of it, and it's being tethered, and this light just starts to fall. It just slowly starts to come down into the room, and he looks up, and the guys that are working the crews looks up and he goes, oh, well, this is interesting. Okay, well, and he steps off to the side, and these guys scramble out. They come in almost silently like mice. They come in with new helium tanks. They hook the thing back up, and Clint's kind of talking to the crowd, calmly for a while. And 3 or 4 minutes later, he goes, okay, well, and they reinflate it and they raise it back up, and it goes back up from the ceiling and goes, okay, well, it looks like we're ready to go again. What would potentially be on another set a complete disaster, on his sets are just yeah, we'll fix it and then we'll be back, So he was impressive. I was impressed working with Patricia Heaton too on The Middle, because she's such a master comic actor because of all those years, I think, on Raymond and stuff like that. She's really good. And there's a lot of great people out there, and you kind of, when you work with people who are real pros, you're really, really grateful that you get those kinds of opportunities. I can name probably 10 people. I don't know off the top of my head, but yeah.
No, you've had lots of opportunities. Is there any role that you didn't get that you thought you were going to get, and it bothers you? Because everyone's you looked and you went, man, I think I got, or a pilot that you were on, it didn't take off. What was one of those things where you were like, fuck, I should have had that?
Well, I blew an audition for my crazy ex-girlfriend. And I thought I was going to get, that was such a good part for me. And I screwed it. I just didn't have a good audition. It was in person. I just, something was going on for me that day, and I fucked it, and I was really up. And then my friend, he wasn't my friend at the time, he became my friend, but then Pete Gardner got it. He was great. He's perfect for this part. I think I was reading for a different part, but it might even been the same. I can't remember. Well, that was one that it was disappointing for me, because I really wanted. Another one early on in my career is I auditioned for the film Fargo, and so many great Minneapolis actors were getting it, and I thought I was a shoo-in for this part, and I was really upset that I didn't get this part. And then when I saw the film, completely different casting than me. I would have done a good job at this. I would have been good casting, but this other guy that they cast was so completely different from me. So I was like, well, okay, I get that. Yeah. Every once in a while, it's when it's something that's really important to you. It isn't, I did my best and I went to go have lunch. It's, I did my best. I beat myself up in the car for 5 minutes. I waited for the phone to ring, and then I finally had dinner. So that, it still gets to you when there's certain things that are really exciting that you want to get on and you want to get in, and you don't get it, and you spend a lot of time working on it too. The worst is when you have 3 callbacks for something, and you think, oh God, I'm so close, and then it still doesn't happen.
Now, because you've been in commercials that have been around for a while, like the Progressive commercial, do people recognize you? Do you go to an airport and you get recognized sometimes? People are like, I know you? I mean, how does that work? Because
Yeah,
commercials,
they
we used
do,
to like
but
Wayne Wilderson. I never met Wayne Wilderson, but I met him. He was at, God, this must have been 8 or 9 years ago. He was at Alex Scooby and Mo Collins' Christmas party in North
yeah,
Hollywood. And
yeah.
my wife was cracking up. She's not my wife. She's like, all these commercial actors were there. She's like, oh my God. I'm like, yeah, that's a guy on the Honda commercial. Oh, that's a guy. But do you get recognized because you've been on commercials and TV a lot?
I do get recognized still here and there, but I'll tell you, as long as you mentioned Wayne, I hang out with Wayne. I do stuff with Wayne. We've gone to we've gone to Vikings games down at the stadium, down here, the San Diego, the whatever where the Chargers play and stuff like that. If you go to any kind of event with Wayne Wilderson, it is just so annoying because people just come up to him, they flock to him, they want to get pictures taken with him, they recognize him right away. And so, like, in the settings where I'm with him, I don't get any attention or even get recognized. If I'm not with him, I would get recognized, but because I'm with him, and so then I end up being the guy taking the, yeah, I'll take the fucking picture. And sometimes you think people are coming up for you, and then suddenly they turn to him, and it's like, could you take our picture? Yes, ma'am, I'll take your picture. Jesus, tap dancing Christ. Yeah. So, because he's just like so recognizable. He does so many things. He does so many commercials and, episodics and stuff like that. So yeah, but I do give him a lot of shit for that. I was like, I don't know if I want to do anything. I don't know if I want to go anywhere with you anymore, Wayne. This is really it's really wearing on my ego.
I have one final question, and I always ask my guests this, and this could be personal, it could be professional, and I like to hear both. Looking back at your career and your life, what are some things you're really proud about? What makes you proud?
I feel proud about a lot of the work I've done in the past. I feel really proud about the Fargo series. That's something I'm particularly proud of, that the work in that. I'm frankly just proud that I was able to become a regular journeyman working actor in Los Angeles, because so many people, to be in the top, 3% of the union as far as working is, that's something I'm proud of, but it's interesting because I've done a few stage shows that only a few hundred people have seen that I'm really, really proud of, The Dresser and Orphans, things that, people saw me do in Minneapolis or saw me do here. I also tell people that, and this is not related to the industry, but in college, I wrote a 70-page thesis that I, to this day, am blown away that I could write at 22 this 70-page thesis. And so I continue to be proud about that, because I think that was a sign of my discipline and understanding.
What was it about? What was the thesis about?
Oh, it's going to be hard to explain. It was on process theodicy. I studied, my degree was in history and theology when I was in school. And so it felt like philosophical theology. So I wrote a paper about theodicy. Theodicy is this is going to be fascinating and dry. Theodicy is the discussion of the existence of the struggle that people have about the existence of God and the existence of evil at the same time. The whole thing about, like, how could there be a God if all the Jews died in World War II, that kind of thing. And so it's this struggle, and there's it's an age-old question that people have about, the why this and why that, and I was fascinated by the question for the most part. So I wrote this very long thesis that was around that theme. And I was pretty proud of it. But as far as like the career stuff, there's just so many moments that I've stood on a set and I felt like, oh, this is the best thing ever. I'm so happy to be doing this, and that's I continue to feel that way even at this age. I still think I've got a good, 20 years left in me. I'm hoping anyway.
Well, that's awesome, man. I'm glad we got to get to do this. It's so funny. I do see on TV a lot. It's always good. I always like when, you see people. That's one thing when I interview people. You always see them on TV and you actually know them. Like no matter what character they play, when you take an hour with someone, you know them and you go, wow, that's really good acting. I mean, there's some people I know that, they just show up and they steal a scene. There's people I know, it's when you watch any TV show, you go, holy crap. The person can have like the littlest part, and you really hijack some scenes, which is good. It's good for you because you're natural, so people recognize you.
Thank you. Yeah,
and it's good that people remember you. And so what's coming up for you? What's this movie? This Western?
What's coming up? There's this kind of thriller that I'm going to be doing in Colombia probably in March, and hopefully some stuff between now and then. I just finished that Western, and now it's kind of the holiday season. Like I went to a callback for Pringles today. And that was, fun. So hopefully I'll book something between now and Christmas, maybe a good commercial or something like that, because other stuff kind of starts to slow down as far as the TV and film stuff. In January, my wife and my son and I are going to go to New Zealand for 2 weeks for a trip. So I'm kind of really looking forward to that. And I actually went back to class with my old acting teacher. So that's been a kind of a really good thing to get the juices going for me. That's been once a week, and I take breaks because if I go work, I take a leave of absence and stuff like that. But so the spring, hopefully this movie will be fun. I'm doing it with this woman who's a really good friend of mine. She's cast as my wife, and she's brilliant. Tara Buck. I don't know if you know Tara Buck, but she was on all those vampire shows. So that's what I'm looking forward to, and going on this trip.
That's awesome. Man. So people go look up Peter on IMDb and go check out all his work and watch his TV shows, watch the movies. You'll say, wow, this guy's a great actor. Also, go to there are a few sites. Go to coopertalk.net, my other podcast. I have over 1,050 episodes up there. Go to on YouTube, look up Lawsuits and Lessons. It's a show I got hired to co-host with my friend John Fagerholm as an entertainment lawyer who now is a business lawyer, and he has lots of his really successful entrepreneur friends on, and we just talk about entrepreneurship and the law. And also the Coop Tank is on YouTube. That's my award-winning local business show. I interview 3 different business owners, entrepreneurs. We just talk about inspiration, motivation, and Coop's Comedy Corner. Go follow it. Go, because Comedy Train Rek, which Jimmy Corhan put so many great shows on. We have me on there. You have Coleman Green's show. You have Ed McGonigal, just some great shows. So check it all out and go to coopscomedycorner.com if you want to buy swag for any of my shows. So anyway, I want to thank you. Check out Peter Breitmayer. I want to thank you for watching or listening or however you're doing it. I'm Steve Cooper, and you have a great week.
Thanks, Coop, for having me on.
Coop's Comedy Corner.